Joined now by Kevin McNamara from KevinMacSports.com. Great new website from the longtime college hoops writer. Good to see you, Kevin. It's Christmas Eve for all of us college hoops fans here in Rhode Island. So much to get to. Let's start with the PC Friars. I thought it was refreshing when Ed Cooley said when we spoke to him on Friday, some of these guys are lost. I don't know what this is going to look like when they tip off. What are you expecting to see from the Friars when we see them on Wednesday?
You know, Providence is very fortunate to be able to come in with a game against Fairfield. I'm not saying Fairfield is no good, but it's not Indiana or it's not North Carolina, who they could play next week. I think all teams, because they haven't had exhibition games, they haven't had a scrimmage against somebody else, all of these coaches are flying blind. I think to answer your question, heavy reliance on the holdovers. David Duke, Nate Watson, Greg Gant, AJ Reeves.
All right, so I want to ask you, give me a breakout returner for PC and a guy who's new to the team that you think can break out this year.
Well, the breakout returner needs to be AJ Reeves. He's battled injuries and inconsistency and has basically been a three-point shooter for 2 years. He needs to be able to do more. He's a better offensive player than that. We'll see if he can do it. As far as a new player, I like Noah Horschler, the kid who sat out last year from North Florida. I think he'll probably start. They'll play him and Nate Watson together a lot. Those are two really good rebounders and gives Providence just a different type of physicality and athleticism in the front court that they've lacked for a couple of years now.
We know PC was picked third in the Big East. What is the floor for this team and what is their ceiling? I guess, what would an average or disappointing season be, and what is the upside for this team? What is the most they could achieve this year?
Yeah, I think the floor would probably be seventh, which would make them barely a bubble team. And the upside, I don't think that they can win the league, but I think the league is pretty wide open after Villanova. You know, Creighton is good. They've had some injuries. I think they're probably not a top 10 team, so they're down a little bit. Providence is really relying on transfers, as are an awful lot of teams around the country. If their transfers click in, they could be a top 25 team.
We've been to so many games at the Dunk over the years. How do you think PC will handle playing at Alumni Hall this year?
You know, it's a unique place because it is small. I don't think that bothers the players one bit. It's going to be really interesting to hear how much you hear Ed Cooley, who's one of the louder coaches in the country and in the league. He better watch his mouth because I think the Fox TV microphones will pick up both coaches really clear. It's going to be a very unique TV experience for the viewer.
We know how PC ended last year prior to COVID kicking them out of the Big East tournament and the rest of the league. Any chance they can bring over momentum from last year? Has there just been too much time between March and now to have any sort of carryover?
Yeah, you know, college teams are not pro teams. They're very different. The rosters changed dramatically. Providence lost 5 key seniors. Two big words there: 5 players and seniors. They're replacing them basically with transfers, and yet the hopes are the same, if not higher. Don't know if that quite matches up. I do think that people are getting ahead of the Friars a little bit too much at this point. But by the end of the year, whatever this year brings, who knows?
They struggled at a conference last year before picking it up at the tail end of the Big East. How important is it for them to do well here with Fairfield and then the Maui Classic down in Nashville?
Well, dramatically. You know, this is going to be such a strange year, Yianni. I can guarantee you that Providence is not going to play every game on its schedule. Either the opponent's going to have some trouble with the virus, or God forbid the Friars will have some trouble with the virus, or a referee can't get to the game, or 2 referees. I mean, truly, everything is on the table. We've seen it the last couple of days around the country. Some of the bigger coaches, some of the bigger programs in the country sidelined. That said, if you can get some wins in the back pocket early, like over in Indiana, over at Texas, teams that they could face next week in Asheville, North Carolina, the Maui Invitational. They go down to TCU, another good team, Jamie Dixon's team. Those will pay off huge down the line because, again, 20 Big East games will be scheduled. I don't know if they'll be able to get all 20 in.
All right, let's switch gears to URI. You mentioned scheduling. Huge boon for their out-of-conference scheduling, getting Arizona State and then Villanova or Boston College, sort of just being at the right place at the right time, already there at Mohegan and ready to fill in for Baylor. That is something that, as URI was trying to figure out their schedule, that becomes huge for their resume come March. Were you surprised when you saw what appeared to be breaking news yesterday, and that all came together pretty quickly?
I was shocked. There were reports earlier in the day that Baylor couldn't make it because their coach, Scott Drew, had tested positive. And interestingly, Bobby Hurley, Danny's brother, said, "I'm not playing Baylor." And Baylor said, "Well, none of our players tested positive. It was just the coach." Bobby said, "I'm not playing Baylor." So Baylor was out. And, Rhode Island was a team that raised its hand and certainly is good enough to compete in that, league, in that tournament against ranked teams like Arizona State and Villanova and a pretty good Boston College team.
Same question I gave you for PC, for URI. Give me a breakout returner and a breakout newcomer. And when I say newcomer, URI has really transformed their roster with transfers, so with a lot of players in mind on that front.
Yeah, I mean, URI had a couple of guys sitting out last year. I won't call them returners because they didn't play. So I would say Antoine Walker, I think, has a chance to really break out. Got his feet wet last year as a transfer from Georgetown, showed that he can play a little bit. This year, he's going to have great opportunity to really make an impact. As far as the newcomer, I think the newcomer who needs to be good is Makai Mitchell. I think he's the better of the two Mitchell guys, 6'10". He was starting and playing at an unbelievable program like the Maryland Terrapins, who I know are fond to your heart, before he transferred. So I think Makai has a chance to be really a high-end player at URI.
How will David Cox figure out roles? And maybe the lineup they put out there against Arizona State looks entirely different in a month, 2 months from now. But how much is, you mentioned they didn't have scrimmages and really any sort of preparation for this season outside of their own team. How do you think he'll manage his roster moving forward?
I can't wait to see URI because their impact players outside of really Fats Russell are transfers, talented transfers. The three best guards are Fats Russell, Jalen Carey, and Jeremy Shepard. Well, two of them have never played with Fats, never played for URI. They all need the ball to be effective. Now, that setup has worked before at previous URI teams, E.C. Matthews, Jeff Doughton, etc., Garrett and whatnot. Don't know if these three guys can mesh this quickly because, boy, right out of the chute, Arizona State, nationally ranked team, maybe Villanova or BC in the next game. Next week, they play Boston College a second time. They might end up playing BC twice in a week. High-end teams, it's exactly what David Cox wanted, but do his transfers come together and become solid right away? That's an awful lot to ask.
What is URI's floor? What is URI's ceiling? Picked, I believe, 6th in the A10. How do you see the Rams playing this year?
I think URI's floor is 6. I cannot imagine that they're going to be worse than that. I do like their talent, and they have maybe the best player in the league in Fats Russell. I think that they can win the league. I know St. Louis and Richmond, everyone's excited about what they have coming back. Good teams. I think Rhode Island, if the transfers all get up to speed really quickly, are just as talented as those teams. So I think they 6-1, I guess, is your answer.
All right, so we know Brown is not playing this year. Bryant starts their season Wednesday. They have a lot of upside in the NEC conference. What do you like about the Bulldogs this year?
Awful lot of new players. I think Jared Grasso and his staff have done an excellent job in 2 years with turning over the roster and adding talent, adding size, adding some shooting ability. We'll see what happens non-league. In all honesty, it really doesn't matter except pulling everybody together. Bryant's path to the NCAA tournament is certainly going to be the NEC, regular season and potentially the conference tournament. That's going to be a really interesting league to watch because, the COVID is lurking around every corner because those teams are all really restricted travel already with the NEC schedule restrictions. It's going to be interesting.
And you mentioned COVID. Your pal Rick Pitino tweeted out yesterday, hey, let's push it back till March. Let's do May Madness. Do you think it's the right decision for college basketball to be, I don't want to say rushing into the season, it's as scheduled, but doing this right now and maybe with the vaccine and everything else going on in the world, they could have slid the season a little bit?
I disagree with Coach Pitino. I think the NCAA has set the parameters of a season. They want everybody to get a minimum of 13 games. We have almost 3 months to get 13 games in. Now, there'll be fits and starts, no question. Will some teams not be able to play for 2 weeks, play a few games, and then sit out for another 2 weeks? Yes, that's bound to happen around the country. Those teams, I think, still can get their 13 games in. They're not going to play 25. It's just not going to happen. The NCAA wants to get their tournament in and wants to get it in March. I agree with that. If by chance it's a really bad winter and COVID does shut down some leagues around the country, and then they push it into April, maybe even May, we can deal with that. But why don't we start with trying to get in 13 games around the country? I think it can happen.
All right, last question I ask you every year. How many NCAA tournament teams come out of the Ocean State this year?
Well, this is the toughest year to answer because no one even knows what the NCAA Tournament Selection Committee is going to be weighing.
Yeah.
I mean, Rhode Island could end up playing 23 games and Providence 15. And they don't, who knows what their non-conference, results are going to be. But I do think that both Providence and Rhode Island have a good chance to make the NCAA tournament this year. I think Providence can be in the top 5 or 6 in the Big East. That should be enough to get in. And I do think that Rhode Island can be in the top 3 in the Atlantic 10. This is a better Atlantic 10 than last year when they had Dayton, who was a number 1 seed.
Right.
It's a little deeper this year. And I think Rhode Island can be in that top 3.
All right, Kevin McNamara. Quick plug for the website and some of your podcast work. What can you tell our viewers about it?
If you love college basketball, go to kevinmacsports.com. Heavy PC and URI news, Big East news, and podcasts. The only person I haven't had who's a big-time basketball person yet is Yianni Kourakis.
All right.
He's on deck.
I don't know if I can bring the heat like Dick Vitale. I mean,
We'll talk Maryland Terrapins. We'll be okay.
Yeah, sure. I like that. Good plug for the Terps earlier before. All right, Kevin, thanks so much. Looking forward to reading your work. And you'll be heading down to Asheville to cover the Friars at the Maui Classic. That's not in Maui. And happy college hoop season to you, and we'll be seeing you again soon.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to it.